Come see us do stand-up in Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, and San Jose, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for the tickets. Hey, guess what? Canada's got a new prime minister, eh?
Oh, that guy got in, thank God.
Yeah. This
the bank guy.
He's the guy straight from the banks.
Yeah.
From the British bank. So England has taken Canada over again.
Yes.
Because they've lost us because we're not helping Ukraine. So now they're taking Canada back.
By the way, and just take a look at him. Doesn't he look like AI was asked to come up with a standard politician?
Oh yeah.
So they got rid of
They
got rid of the inflatable sex doll prime minister, and now they're going with reliable car salesman.
Well, because it looks so generic, liberal. You went to a liberal store to buy a liberal brand, liberal.
So this is from the AP. Canada facing nation-defining moment. Carney is credited with keeping money flowing through the Canadian economy during the financial crisis by acting quickly and cutting interest rates to their lowest level ever of 1%, working with bankers to sustain lending through the crisis, and critically letting the public know rates would remain low so they would keep borrowing. He was the first central banker. That's what their prime minister is now, a central banker, to commit to keep an historic low for an indefinite time. Okay. Also, he's a former Goldman Sachs executive. He worked for 13 years in London, Tokyo, New York, and Toronto before being appointed deputy governor of the Bank of Canada in 2003. In 2020, he began serving as the United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Action and
so he's
Finance.
Like a hardcore dark occultist.
Yes. So look at this headline. Mark Carney failed to stop Brexit, but hopes to save Canada from populism.
Yeah, that's the worst.
He's not going to save Canada from, I don't know, illegal immigration or inflation. He's going to save Canada from listening to the voice of its own people. That's what populism is.
Isn't that a slur that oligarchs came up with for democracy itself? It's like, what?
Populism?
People are in power. Yeah, the paper scats in the guy's book, Listen Liberal. He wrote about that. They invented the term populism in the paper as like a dirty word.
So now they're saying he's going to try and save Canada from listening to the will of its own people. I mean, they might as well be America at this point. Just sign the paperwork. Get it over with.
America would never give you like welfare to commit suicide. That would be up to you.
That's right. Yeah.
They would give you suicide.
So Viva Frey tweets out, you want to know who he is? He's a Bilderberg guy.
Oh, well, that's ominous.
He is unelected. By the way, he's unelected. He's not, he wasn't even a member of parliament, I don't think.
Well, Bilderberg elected him, obviously.
That's right. Has unelected WEF Davos-speaking Bilderberg frequently 3-passport-carrying globalist Mark Carney pledged to immediately call a national election? Or does he plan on exploiting his appointment to rule a country of 38 million people based on the votes of 152,000 registered liberals? And there he is, Mark Carney.
Wait, is that a real question? It's not.
He's at the Bilderberg meetings. There he is.
What do you think that they said at the Bilderberg meeting, Viva Frey? Hey, you know what? Why don't you represent your people in Canada? I'm sure that was the notes of the meeting.
And here is Klaus Schwab admitting that they have control of the cabinets in Canada. Watch this.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like
the younger generation.
Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the world economic forum.
So that was half the cabinet of Justin Trudeau. Half, he's bragging, came from the WEF. Here's what Ian Carroll has to say about the new Prime Minister of Canada. Here's what he has to say.
When you look at his overview, I mean, you start out with a pretty classic banker's career, which, remember, we're not hiring to be a banker. We're hiring to be the leader of Canada, ostensibly. So it's an interesting choice, and it's not a surprising one that they choose a banker first off. But then when you look through his banking resume, it goes from like the typical Oxford University to Goldman Sachs to Bank of Canada, and that's all relatively expected. And then the governor of the Bank of England jumps out at you as a distinct departure from that Canadian like kind of North American trend.
Governor of the Bank of England.
I said England took over Canada.
Yep. There's just more.
The moment I see the governor of the Bank of England, I start to have questions. You mentioned earlier several of these globalist organizations, the WEF and the Bilderberg Group, being a little bit deeper down in this document, and
G7 too.
Yeah, and so that starts to get me really thinking about what exactly is going on up in Canada, and how is Trump going to deal with this?
Tell me a little bit about what you know about the Bank of England and the International Bank of Settlements.
So a lot of what I know specifically about the Bank of England is based on their sort of founding history, their history through the 1800s, 1900s. And the thing about the International Bank of Settlements, there's sort of this trifecta going on. And anyone who's read Confessions of an Economic Hitman will be familiar with the system to a certain extent. That was written by John Perkins, who was a famous CIA operative that is now basically a whistleblower on how this financial cartel works on the global scale, where it's been put in place slowly over time and the details are extremely complex. But between the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the International Bank of Settlements, those three organizations function in different, in sort of different aspects of a global financial cartel. And what John Perkins describes in his book is how those banking establishments, first they serve to attempt to control foreign nations through offering loans that they'll never be able to repay back. Yeah. And they'll promise things like, we'll develop your freeway systems, we'll develop hydroelectric dams, we'll do all these amazing development projects and modernize your country. And this has been done over and over and over, from Mexico to Africa,
North Korea, we did under the Clinton administration.
Exactly. And so you get these countries hooked on loans that they can't repay with promises of grandeur and modernization. And once they're hooked on those loans, then you own them financially. But what John Perkins describes is that sometimes countries will resist because they'll understand the financial nature of what they're being offered as being actually quite predatory. And for anyone that doesn't take those sort of financial incentives to come under the fold, that's when they start to send smear campaigns, slander. They start to infiltrate people. And if that doesn't work, then they send what John Perkins describes as the jackals, which are assassins, usually CIA or some other.
Like Saddam or Gaddafi.
Exactly. John Perkins specifically talks about his work in Central America, but Gaddafi and Saddam are great examples. And there are many around the world. And that book, I highly recommend it to anyone who has not read it. And so I'm not trying to say that Mark Carney is directly involved in some plot to assassinate foreign leaders. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that there's a distinct departure from a classic Canadian banker's career path. And Oxford stands out to me in that path. Is if he's first off, he graduated from Harvard in 1988, I see, with a bachelor's degree and high honors. And this is a frequent pattern you see amongst these globalist sort of golden boys, is that they'll get an Ivy League education in the States. And then if they're bound for this globalist track, they'll often go over to a Princeton or an Oxford or one of these other international Ivy Leaguers. And that starts to associate them with the international scene and with this Bank of England scene. So once you notice the Oxford University on his resume, it's not as surprising that he then gets involved as the governor of the Bank of England. But it is a very clear trend that this guy might not be all that he seems to be. And
sure.
So when I see that, I think it's time to dig.
What's that thing in India where there was an Indian government that England installed called the Raj, I want to say? That's what Canada is now. They're installed, because they lost America. They're panicking about Ukraine. They're going to install their own controlled puppet state in Canada. And that's what that guy is. He's a global,
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
There you go.
So now Canada is a puppet of the international banking cartel, the WEF, Davos, the Bilderbergs. That's what this is. That's what's happening in Canada.
When Bilderberg, when it became known that it was indeed a thing because it was a conspiracy theory.
They used to say it was a crazy conspiracy theory.
Yeah. So I want to say 96 or 7. It came out in the Toronto Sun or one major Canadian newspaper, the meeting. You know what the notes were on the meeting of Bilderberg? They're planning to break up Canada. You know how they talk about it now of the U.S. getting put?
Yeah.
That's what they were secretly talking about in 1997 that leaked out. Breaking up Canada. And then it got screwed up by journalists doing their job. Journalists did their job and reported this thing was taking place. So imagine that.
The AP goes on to say either Carney will call an election in the coming days or weeks, or the opposition parties in Parliament could force one with a no confidence vote later this month. Trudeau urged Liberal supporters to get involved. This is a nation-defining moment. Democracy is not a given. Yeah, it's thanks to people.
It's taken away is what it is.
Yeah, thanks to people like Justin Trudeau, freedom's not a given, but it is a taken.
There's more of a taken up here.
Freedom is not a given. Even Canada is not a given, Trudeau said. Yeah.
It's a given away.
You're talking about his freedom being taken away. It's only because he just lost his freedom to take away everybody else's freedom.
Yeah, well, it's like when the Darth Vader is like the Emperor is not as forgiving as I. We'll meet the Emperor, guys.
Yep.
That's your new one.
Yep. I mean, Justin Trudeau, it was just as shady, slimy, and corrupt as this new guy. But it's just so much more obvious now that they're just installing this guy who's the former governor of the London Bank, the Bank of England.
Yeah. This is a guy that can hold his coke, unlike Justin.
Yeah, that's right. Come see us do stand-up in Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, and San Jose, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for the tickets.